Hello, you're listening to the Career Changemaker podcast. Having the courage to leave a career that you have worked hard to build and try something else can be tough. So in each episode, we dive into key career change strategies so that you have a clear understanding of what is required to transition into a new role or a new industry without feeling like you have to start at the bottom or have to take a massive pay cut, because ain't nobody got time for that. If you are ready for frank and honest discussions about how to become a career change maker, keep listening. I'm your host, lawyer turned career strategist and executive coach, Janine Esbrand. Hey. So recently we hosted the Make Your Next Career Move Your Best Move masterclass, and we had some incredible feedback from those who were in attendance. So I decided that I was going to pull the audio and share it with you here on the podcast. So if you didn't manage to join us live, you can now catch the replay here on the podcast and listen as I walk you through our 4-step framework to transitioning into an ideal role, so that you can hear and understand where you need to be focusing your energies so that you can make the type of move or transition that you desire to make. So let's dive in. All right, so we're going to be diving in today. I want to say welcome to you. Thank you for being here. You could be doing anything else, but you've chosen to be here this evening. So my hope is that you come away with some real golden nuggets and that you have some actionable takeaways that you can apply to your career. So what you can expect is some answers to what you've been looking for, an engaged experience, and some tangible, actionable takeaways. So as I'm going through, if there's any questions that come up for you, feel free to type them in the chat. And at the end, I will be doing some Q&A so I can answer any specific questions related to your particular situation. And so before we dive into the presentation, it'd be great to kind of gauge where everybody's at in terms of their career right now. So I'd love for you to type 1 in the chat if you are considering a career transition into a different role or into a different industry, and type 2 in the chat if you're thinking about going for promotion or moving to advanced levels in your career, and type 3 if you're thinking about starting your own thing or making that kind of move. So 1, if you're you want to transition to something else; 2, if you're looking to step up into leadership; and 3, if you're looking to start your own thing. Just so I've got a gauge as to where we are, and then I can make sure that I tailor the examples and stuff as I go through. 2 or 3, we've got 1. Okay, so we've got a mix. 1 and 3. Okay, so we've got a mix of everyone across the board. 2-ish, love it. That is good. Okay, so let's dive in. Now is a great time for you to be considering and focusing on what your next best move looks like. And the reason why it's a great time now is because there has been a lot of change in the world of work. So I use this revolving door imagery because there's been a lot going on in the world of work in various different ways. And so I encourage people to really be thinking about, what can I be doing to take ownership of my career progression? Because the world of work and the places that you may work or the industries that you may be in are in a state of flux. So I just want to highlight a few different things that we faced over the last few years since the pandemic. So immediately after the pandemic, we saw there being the Great Resignation, which was where a lot of people decided that they were going to quit their jobs. Like, they had the time to reflect, they had the time to think about what it is that they really wanted. And for many people, they decided that they were going to move. So we had this Great Resignation where there was like lots of people leaving their jobs. And then that was kind of like 2020 going into 2021. And then we found that we were in like the Great Reshuffle, because lots of people moved out of their jobs. So then there's lots of people moving into roles. So within the marketplace, there's a lot of movement and organizations having to think, okay, what are we going to do in terms of retaining our talent, and how are we going to go about plugging the gaps that are now emerging because people are moving. And then we heard about quiet quitting. So I don't know how many of you have been like paying attention to this stuff or noticing this stuff, perhaps on LinkedIn or in circles that you're in. But quiet quitting was really about seeing that people were deciding, actually, I'm not going to leave my job physically, but mentally I'm checking out. So people are quiet quitting because they're not showing up and going above and beyond. They're just doing the bare minimum because they have to be there, and they're just staying there rather than moving into another role. So that was a whole thing last year. And then this year, there's been more talk about quiet hiring. And so quiet hiring is really when organizations are saying, okay, we don't necessarily have the resource, or we're not sure whether we should be investing in people right now because the market is in a state of flux. So what we're going to do is we're going to quiet hire, which means we're going to look internally to find candidates that we can skill up and that we can give additional responsibilities so that we can plug the gaps that we have in terms of talent from within. So that's been happening. Quiet hiring is a thing. And more recently, there's been a lot of talk about AI, a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and what that means in the workplace, how we can be preparing for that, and what we can be doing as individuals to be prepared for how the robots are going to be getting more involved in the world of work. So those are some of the things that have been going on over the last few years. And so it's really important as individuals to be thinking about how do these things impact me, and how am I thinking going forward. So I want to talk about who's this training really for. If you are somebody who is a female professional who has a desire to either pivot into a more impactful role, step up into a more senior role, switch industries, move into consulting or entrepreneurship, then this training is absolutely for you. And by the looks of the poll that we took earlier, you all fall into one of these camps. So if you want to stop coasting, and I see a lot of people that I speak to, a lot of clients that I work with are coasting essentially and wasting time in a role that isn't right for them. If you feel like you're in a place now and you don't want to be there, or you shouldn't be there, or you've been there for too long, then this is absolutely going to be a helpful training for you. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about how to identify an ideal type of career move that allows you to leverage your existing experience. We're going to discuss how to position yourself for great opportunities inside and outside of your organization, and also talk about how do you sell yourself as an ideal candidate so that you can negotiate higher offers. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to touch on today. So let's talk a little bit about the journey. So the way that I look at it, there's 4 major steps. There's a 4-step formula that you can follow that's going to help you to go from where you are now to ultimately where it is that you want to be and your next ideal opportunity. And I emphasize the word ideal because for many people, you can make a transition and you can move from where you are now into another role, but it isn't always necessarily your ideal role. It might just be a reactive role. I need to get out of here, so I'm going to go do something else. Or a recruiter's reached out to me about this role. It sounds good. I'm just going to go for it. I like to advise people that you need to do more than just say, oh, does it sound good? Take more of an inside out approach to your decision making when it comes to opportunities to make sure that it's actually the right fit for you. So what we're going to be walking through today is based on the Career Changemaker framework that I've developed through working with lots and lots of female professionals. And if you like what I talk about in terms of the framework, then I'll encourage you to join one of our programs. And I can tell you more about that later, but I just wanted to let you know that this framework underpins all of the work that I do in various different areas. So who am I? I should introduce myself because for many of you, you're new to me, I'm new to you. So just to give you a bit of background so you know who I am and why I'm qualified to even talk about this stuff. So I am Janine Esperand. I'm a career strategist and an executive coach. I'm a podcast host, an international speaker and a former lawyer. And I've made many transitions in my legal career. I practiced law in different ways. So in private practice, in-house, I did legal consulting before I transitioned into my coaching business full time. At this point, the number's probably higher than 70 now. I've coached lots of female professionals around the world to take control of their careers and transition into ideal roles or create their own roles. And everything I teach today is specifically designed to help you look at how you can take ownership of your career and leverage your expertise to build fulfilling and impactful careers. So just a bit about how I got to here. I started out my career, before I started my career, when I was really young, when I was about 8 years old, I was quite argumentative as a child. My mum would say I was argumentative. I would say I was opinionated. And I remember her saying to me in the heat of a discussion that we were having that I should be a lawyer because I had an answer for everything. So when she said that, I didn't really think much of it. Fast forward a few years, and I remember seeing a program with this lady on the program and seeing her in a law firm in court, advocating for what her client wanted, arguing, putting together a brief, having what seemed like a great time. That made me say, oh, actually, what my mum said years ago, maybe I should follow that, and follow the path of becoming a lawyer. So Ally McBeal was very much partially responsible for me becoming a lawyer. And so I followed the path, I figured out what I needed to do, and then I qualified as a lawyer back in 2012. But shortly before qualifying, I went on a mission trip to East Africa, which really changed my perspective on the type of impact I wanted to make in my career, because we went into prisons, we were educating people about their legal rights. There were people who were on remand in prisons in Kenya who hadn't really done anything wrong. It's just that a police officer had picked them up, asked them to pay a bribe. They couldn't afford to pay it. They were put in jail, and some of them were there for years, like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And so the organization that I went with was helping them to fight for their rights and understand how to represent themselves. And so it was really impactful work. I really enjoyed the experience. And then I came back and I thought, okay, how can I do something that's going to help people on a more personal level? Because I was working as a commercial lawyer, and yes, I was helping people, but it was about making money. It wasn't about personal impact. And so that's where I started my journey of exploration to figure out what I could do, and then came across coaching, and then started coaching alongside my legal career. And then I went on maternity leave with my first son back in 2016 and decided I didn't want to go back to working 16-hour days as a lawyer. And so at that point, I started building a portfolio career where I was working part-time as a lawyer, had transitioned into working in-house, and also started building my career coaching practice on the side. So that's kind of where I was up until the pandemic. And in 2021, I found myself homeschooling 2 young children. At that time, I think they were 3 and 5. No, maybe they were 4 and 6. 4 and 6, working as part-time legal counsel for a startup and serving coaching clients. So needless to say, my mind was frazzled. And at that point, I decided it was time to transition into my coaching practice full time, as I had been building it up alongside my career. So as you can see, I've made lots of transitions along the way. I've pretty much made all the different types of transitions that you can make. And so I love to draw on my personal experience as well as my coaching expertise to support people with figuring out their best next move. So let's talk about what the exact steps are to landing a role that is ideal for you. And as I walk you through this framework, I just want you to know that this is exactly the same framework that I've applied myself multiple times. At each of those points where I've made a transition, I applied this framework. So I kind of used the coaching that I learned and self-coached myself so that I could move forward. And that's how I built this framework. So 4-step formula, I like to call it the data method. And it's a data method for a few reasons. So it's the data method because there's these 4 steps. Firstly, you want to define what it is you actually want to do. Then you want to align what you want to do with your existing experience. Then you want to transition plan. So plan how you're actually going to make the transition. And then lastly, you want to attract opportunities. You want to attract the actual roles that you want to go for. So it's the data method because there's an acronym there, but it's also the data method because it's really important that you make data-driven decisions when it comes to making a career change. A big reason why many people feel reluctant about making a change is because it feels very risky. And it often feels very risky because you don't have enough data to make your decision on. And so when you're taking this approach, you're making sure that you're going out and you're looking for evidence and you're building up a case for actually making the type of move that you want to make so that you feel confident in moving forward in any direction that you choose. So I'm going to dive into the formula. Is everyone happy for me to dive in? Type yes in the chat if you're following so far and you are good for me to go and break down the different steps. So 4-step formula. So the first is identify your ideal type of career move. If you are making a move in your career, there's many ways that you can move. So understanding, okay, what is the type of career move that I'm going to be trying to make right now and defining that for yourself. The next is align. So align and leverage your existing expertise to your target opportunity. This is really important, particularly for my women in the house, because often when we're thinking about making a career move, we can assume that we're going to have to start at the bottom. We're going to have to start all over. We're going to have to take a pay cut when actually that isn't often the reality. And so if you can understand how you can align what you've already been doing or what you've done in the past with where you want to go, it makes it so much easier for you to position yourself for the opportunity. The next is your transition plan. So it's like, okay, I've decided where it is that I want to go. I've got an idea about how I'm going to align, but what is the plan? What steps are we going to take? So it's about creating your path of least resistance transition plan. So I like to tell people there's different ways that you can go, but make sure that we're exploring the path that is the easiest way rather than the one that is going to be most taxing, because you're less likely to take the path if it seems too hard. And then lastly is attract. How do we position you as an ideal candidate to attract opportunities? And attract is really important because we can fall into the trap of feeling like I need to go out and I need to chase opportunities. I need to chase recruiters. I need to be on job boards all the time. But that is part of the puzzle. But also, if you position yourself correctly, you can start attracting opportunities to you. And I'll show you an example of a client that did that in a really nice way a little bit later on. So let's break down the different steps. So let's start with the step one, identify your ideal type of career move. So I want to talk about the mistake that most people make. So the biggest mistake that most people make that I've seen happen time and time again is jumping to action too soon when you're in a place of contemplating what your next move is. So if you find yourself in your role right now and you're feeling frustrated, maybe you feel undervalued and overlooked, maybe you feel like what you're doing right now is boring, or you feel like you've outgrown your position, or you know that you want to move, the frustration that you might feel on a day-to-day basis can cause you to jump too soon to taking action. So you might jump into speaking to recruiters, scrolling job boards for inspiration, submitting online applications that you don't hear back from. But when you jump into those things too soon, they can often lead you to another unfulfilling role, right? And the reason is when you move, you're likely to apply for and land something very similar to what you're doing right now if you make that jump too soon. So when you go out into the marketplace and you speak to a recruiter is going to try and put you in a similar role because it's easier for them to place you in a similar role. And we have to remember that a recruiter's goal is to place you and ultimately they get commission. So if you go to them and you say, I want to make this different career move, they're going to say, no, that's too hard for you to do. And they're going to pigeonhole you into what you've been doing already. So if you don't take the time to really figure out what you want, you might jump out of this role and end up in a very similar role. And 6 months down the line, be like, actually, I still feel like this isn't the place I want to be. When you're in a place of maybe burnout or frustration, it's hard to make decisions that will serve you in the long term. So sometimes we can be very reactive and say, I just need to get out of here. This is just too much. And then you leave. But actually, that might be a short-term fix and it's not the long-term play. And then without intention and strategy, you're not going to find a fulfilling role that you're excited about if you're working from the wrong criteria. We have to make sure that you're actually working from the right criteria and you know what you want and why you want it so that it's easier for you to make the right move later on. So the better way of approaching it, so that's the mistake that people make, but the better way to approach it is to conduct a career audit. And the career audit is there so that you can uncover exactly what's not working for you and what the ingredients are for a fulfilling role for you. Because sometimes it's like you can, when you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling like I don't want to do this, you can be throwing everything out the window and just say, I want to do something completely different. But when you take the time to do a career audit, it helps you to see what type of move do I actually have to make so that I can feel fulfilled or happy in the work that I'm doing. So the method that we use inside my programs is called the shift, pivot or leap, the SPL method. And we talk about, do you need to make a shift? Which is essentially moving yourself out of this environment into a similar environment, a similar role, but a different, you're changing your environment. Do you need to make a pivot where you're using your same skill set and your expertise? Perhaps that's in a different industry, or perhaps you're trying something else, like you're staying in the same industry, but you're using a different skill set. Or do you need to take a leap where it's like, I'm done. I'm done with this industry. I'm done with what I've been doing. I want to do something completely different. There's a different level of commitment, of energy, of resource that is going to be required for you to make a shift than it is for you to make a leap. So sometimes when people are thinking about making a career change, it's important to recognize that your job isn't the thing that you do in a vacuum. Your job is part of your life. So you have to consider, okay, if I'm going to make a leap, do I have the bandwidth in my personal life to make a leap right now? Or is it going to make sense for me to make a pivot and then maybe make a leap in the long term? Or do I recognize that I need to make a move first before I can make the long-term move? So it's about you really assessing what type of move do I need to make based on what's going on for you right now. When you do that, you're able to have a much more targeted, efficient, and enjoyable job search strategy when you go through this process, because you can be way more targeted. So what I found in my experience is clients that take the time to do this step and really dig into doing a career audit, they end up landing a new role and they may have only had 1 or 2 interviews, because after doing this, they're very focused, versus other people who have like this scattergun approach of like, I want to move, I'm going to apply to a role here, and I'm also going to apply to this type of role, and I'm also going to apply to this over here. And what ends up happening is their applications are very diluted. They're not specific enough. And so they might be doing lots and lots and lots of applications and not getting anything back, because it isn't targeted, and it can't be targeted because you don't actually know what it is that you're looking for, what you really want. So taking this targeted approach, it might feel like it's taking longer, but essentially what you're doing is slowing down at the beginning so that you can speed up later on. And the job search process goes a lot quicker. So just to give you an example of this, there was a client that I worked with. This was in the height of the pandemic. Her name's Jen. She was working as a real estate lawyer, and she had gone on maternity leave, her second one. She was coming back and she was like, I don't think I want to be a lawyer anymore. I think I want to do something else. I'm burnt out with it. I just want to do something else. When we took the time to do the audit, she realized that it wasn't actually being a lawyer that she wasn't happy with. She actually enjoyed practicing law, but she didn't like the types of clients that she was working with. And she didn't like the area of law that she was actually doing, but she liked the practice of law. So having done the audit, she realized that she could make a simple pivot that would allow her to make the type of impact that she wanted to make with the right types of clients. And so it was only a pivot she needed rather than leaping into something completely different. And so she ended up moving from working as a real estate lawyer to working in another firm that had a focus on charitable organizations rather than commercial property, which she was doing before. So as she saw that impact and the types of clients change, she was really happy with the work that she was doing then. And as she made the pivot, she was able to get a salary increase and a promotion at the same time. So this is what she said. She's like, I gained clarity on why I was feeling frustrated. It was because the values and the work that I was doing at my current firm weren't aligning with my personal values and my approach to life. So when she realized the misalignment, she knew that that's what she needed to focus on with looking for her next opportunity. And this is just a screenshot from our community where she said, I've got good news, I got the job. And it felt really surreal to her to say that she was moving on. And now this is a couple of years later, she's working at a firm that she really likes. She feels like she's making a real impact through her work. And I see her updates on LinkedIn all the time. And she's really loving the work that she's doing. Most people will approach their next move by considering what's required in the job spec, researching the company, learning about the industry. And then once they do those things, they'll contemplate whether or not this sounds good. This approach is risky because you're taking an outside-in approach. It's like, oh, does that sound good from the outside? Whereas if you take the time to understand what you want, it's so much easier to filter out opportunities and decide what is right for you and what isn't. So when it comes to you, making sure that what it is that you're going for is right for you, there's a process that you can go through to validate your ideas. So part of defining what it is that you want to do is about making sure that this path is correct. You can have ideas and say, oh, this sounds good, this sounds good. How do we know? Well, we want to go and gather some data around that. So the validation process that I guide clients through is called having golden nugget conversations. Another term for this you might have heard is like informational interviews. But the reason why I like to talk about them as golden nugget conversations, and I frame them in the way that I do with clients, is that one conversation could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be half an hour, can save you thousands of pounds or dollars and months or years of going down the wrong path. Because what I've seen happen is when people think that they want to make a move, they immediately will jump to, I need to go and do a course. I need to go back and get a master's. I need to go and do this training and invest lots of time and energy in that when actually it might not be the right path for you. So the encouragement is have conversations targeted conversations with the right people in the right way so that you can assess and determine, is this the path for me? So here's the example that I want to give you of that. So Linda, so she was in our program, she came in and she has an idea that I know she's working as a regulatory lawyer. She came in and she said, I think I want to be a psychotherapist. Very different. She was about to take a leap, like from law to psychotherapy. If you want to be a psychotherapist, you've got to study for a number of years to make it happen. I think it's about 7. She had a golden nugget conversation with somebody who was about to qualify as a psychotherapist. And this is the message that she sent in our community afterwards. She said, hey, Janine, wow, Zola's a true inspiration. We had a really fruitful and enjoyable conversation. So much good food for thought. She definitely brought home the reality of a career in psychotherapy. And I think for me, the bottom line is the time commitment involved, 4 years, which is a long time at this time in my life, but would be worth it for the right career. I'm still researching, reflecting and weighing up all the options. Thanks again for the hookup because I introduced her. What happened after this message is she done some reflection. She really thought about what it was that she wanted to do. And she decided that psychotherapy wasn't the path for her and ultimately ended up becoming a mediator. So she could have, if she hadn't had this conversation, she could have thought psychotherapy was right for her and spent 4 years going down that path only to realize that it wasn't right for her. So yeah, as I say, after the process, she transitioned into being a mediator and she's completed her training now. So those are 2 areas that you need to be thinking about when it comes to defining. It's like, what is it that I want to do? How am I thinking about that? And then am I validating my ideas so that I'm not jumping into it too soon? Step 2, align and leverage your existing expertise to your target opportunity. As I said, if there's any questions as I'm going through, do feel free to type them in the chat. So when it comes to aligning your experience, the biggest mistake that I see people make is assuming that the gap between where you are now and where you desire to be is huge. Many people will focus mainly on whether or not they have all of the experience required for their target role. And if they don't see that they have all of the experience required, they discount it. It's like, I'm looking at the job spec, I don't think I can do all of these, and therefore it's not going to be possible for me, and then discount it. And that is a big mistake because having all of the experience isn't the only thing that you need to be considering. Isn't the only thing you need to be considering because your skill set that you've developed over the years in the work that you've been doing now is very much transferable. What you need to be thinking more about is what results have I been able to achieve? So there's experience, but there's also, I've done these things, I've got these results, I've used this skill set. And then when you can identify how the results that you've gotten align with results that you might need to get in that new space, and you can understand how the skill set that you've used and developed is relevant in the new space, then it's easier for you to talk about and easy for you to demonstrate why your existing experience is actually a value add for the opportunity that you want to move into. So we don't want to assume straight away that, oh, this is too different, I can't do it. It comes down to how you position yourself. And we'll talk more about positioning in a little while. I put these different images on here because when you think about all of you on this call, anyone watching the replay, like you as an individual, you have such a unique blend of experience, of background, of expertise. Even if there's 2 of you on here that do a similar role, the likelihood is you've had very different journeys to get there. And even if you've had a similar journey, the way that you execute in your role is going to be different. Why? Because you're a different person. Like your blend of skill set, your values, your interests, like how you show up, your strengths, that's going to be different. And so you deliver differently. So it's really important for you to lean into what makes you unique as an individual, as a candidate, because then you're able to sell that uniqueness in alignment with what they're looking for. So I just want to encourage you around that because it's easy to think, oh, if I am, like I used to do this as a lawyer when I first started out, because I came from a background where we didn't have any lawyers in our family. I didn't know any. So I was looking at the blueprint, like I was going into the organization, the law firm that I worked for and saying, okay, if I want to be a lawyer, I have to do this, this, and this. But I'm Janine, and the way that I do things is different. So I can understand how to apply the law, but I was able to bring my personality to it. So I'm a people person. So I leverage that in my practice of law to help me to get ahead and to build good rapport with clients and colleagues. So the more you understand about yourself, the more you're then able to leverage what you can bring to the table and stand out in a crowded marketplace. All right. So step 3 is our transition plan. So I mentioned before that, when we're thinking about where we are now, where we're going to be, we can think that the gap is huge. And when it comes to the transition plan, that perceived distance between where you are now and where you're trying to get to, that can be the thing that holds you back from taking any steps. Like if it feels too big, if it feels too difficult, it's like, I don't know if I can make this transition. I don't know if I can do it. Then many of us don't take the move, don't take the step. When I speak to people, it amazes me how long they have been considering making a career change. I'd love to know from you guys, how long have you been considering making some kind of move in your career? Let me know in years or months, like roughly how long have you been thinking about it? You can type in the chat. 2 years, 5 to 9 years. Yeah. This is 5 plus, yes. Yes. This is so common. So common. When I speak to people, it's rare that I speak to people when they say, I've just been thinking about it for a few months. It's often years. And so you don't have to type this in the chat, but I do want you to think about what has been the reason why I haven't taken action for this length of time. 2 years, 5 years, 5 to 9 years, like what caused you to not take action so far? And when you contemplate that question, it can help you to see like, what are the things that are holding me back? There's going to be fears in there. There's going to be beliefs that you have around what's possible for you. But it's important to address, identify what they are so that you're able to address them and move past them. But when it comes to making a transition, ultimately it's about building a bridge. It's about building a bridge. You might be building a big bridge like this, or you might be building a little bridge, but it's about I need to bridge the gap and then understand what is going to be required for me to bridge the gap. And depending on the type of move you're deciding to make, whether it's a shift, whether it's a pivot, whether it's a leap, there may be more links to your bridge. There may be more that you have to do. But knowing what those pieces are is going to help you to then actually create a tangible, actionable plan rather than it just feeling like this overwhelming thing that isn't possible for you. So I've just put up here a few different things that you can be doing to bridge the gap. So plug any knowledge gap. So if you know that, say you want to go into tech, for example, and you know that there's a specific skill set that you need and you don't have it, how can you plug the knowledge gap? And as I said before, how do we do it in a way where it's the path of least resistance, not going and doing a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree, but how can I leverage digital learning and online courses and other ways of getting training in these areas so that I can plug the gaps? Thinking about leveraging LinkedIn, are you building out your personal brand on LinkedIn? Do you have a presence on the platform? Do you understand how to use it to network with people that can open up opportunities? Updating your personal pitch documents. And when I say that, I'm talking about updating your CV or your resume, updating your LinkedIn profile, updating any cover letters that you might be working on, so that they are updated, not just for updating's sake. So when I say that, I don't mean just jump in and update it. Because what I say to people all the time, they say, I need to look for a new job, so I'm going to update my resume or my CV. My question is, update it with what? Because if you haven't done the work in the first phase, how do you know what you're updating it for? And if you're not clear on what you're updating it for, it's going to be very generic. So you need to update it so that it's relevant and it speaks to what it is that you want. Audit your existing experience. Take the time to take a trip down memory lane and think about your past experience and what you've done and the results that you've gotten in your career. It amazes me how often people overlook some amazing things that they've done in their past, just because they've done it. So you don't see the value in it when it's you. So really slowing down to pay attention to, what have I done? Where have I got good feedback? Where have I made a real difference in my organization? Because then that can help you to see how that can be used going forward. Strategic networking. I say strategic because networking isn't just about going to networking events and just working the room and collecting business cards, which is what I thought it was when I first started out in my career. I was like, oh, I've got to this event and I've got all of these business cards, and then just put them on my desk and didn't do anything with them. That's not networking. Networking is essentially building relationships. So how are we being intentional about building relationships with the right types of people that can open doors and opportunities, and that you can also open doors and opportunities for them too? Learning how to articulate your experience. Do you know how to tell a good story about the work that you've done and the impact that you've made? Have you been working on your mindset? If you've been thinking about making a career move for a long time, like, mindset is probably a big piece of the puzzle as to why you haven't made a change yet. And so taking the time to do the work on your mindset around what you believe to be possible for you is key if you're going to want to make that transition. Looking at accountability, like, have I put accountability in place? If I know that I'm procrastinating and I'm not making moves when I know that I want to, how can I build in some accountability? Maybe team up with someone else, get in community with other people who can help me. And then develop a personal brand. Like, how can I be intentional about using the digital tools that we have nowadays so that I'm showing up for the thing that I want to now be known for? So those are all examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are the types of things that you can be thinking about and working on when you're building your bridge from where you are now to where you want to get to. It's important to be focusing on the right things in the right order. And that's why we have this 4-step framework, because if you jump too soon to the bridge before you've identified what you're moving towards, it's like you can be just doing busy work that's not moving you forward. If you don't understand what you're aligning, then it's like, I'm doing stuff, but is it actually moving the needle? And everyone's busy. If you're employed right now, if you have a role right now, you're doing your day job while you're trying to figure this stuff out. And so you want to be taking moves and taking action that's streamlined, but that is still moving you forward. So just to speak to you about Caitlin, so this was the example I said I'd come to around positioning yourself, particularly this is relevant for LinkedIn. So Caitlin was coming from an oil and gas industry, and she was working for the company she worked for 11 years. And she didn't think that she'd be able to make a move into another industry without taking a salary drop. And she ultimately was able to move from oil and gas into renewable energy, which is quite a different space. She got promoted in the process. She got a salary increase, and she was able to negotiate flexibility. But what I want to highlight to you here is that she said, I had 2 interviews scheduled this week and another 3 for next week. What's really powerful about this is that Caitlin did not reach out to any recruiters, and she did not apply for any roles online. Those interviews came after she updated her LinkedIn profile. So she went through our training on how you optimize your LinkedIn profile. And literally after she finished doing that, she started getting inbound opportunities to the point where she had to stop responding because she had so many open conversations going, and she had interviews with various different companies. And then she was able to land this role, which was ideal for her. She was able to get that salary increase, but it all came from her updating her profile. So when I spoke to you earlier about attracting, this is what it's about. It's like there's one part of it where you have got recruiters working on your behalf, but then you can take ownership of how am I positioning myself so that the people that are looking for someone for this opportunity see my profile and they want to speak to me. And that's exactly what Caitlin was able to do. So with LinkedIn is such a powerful resource for that. And so the final step is positioning. How am I now, if I have gone through the process of knowing what I want to do, and then I've aligned my experience and I've started to think about my transition plan, how am I positioning myself as an ideal candidate for the opportunities that are coming my way? And it comes down to positioning. Like, there's so much strength in positioning, which is why I call it power positioning. How are you being viewed in the marketplace, and what are you doing to intentionally show up in the way that you want people to view you? So instead of focusing too much on how you can tick all of the boxes on a job description or fit into the criteria, what we want to be thinking about is bigger picture. So we want to be thinking beyond just what is on the job spec. So what often happens is we get the job spec, we see the bullet points, and then we go through them line by line, and we say, can I do that? Can I do? And if this resonates, let me know in the chat. Say yes if it resonates. You go through line by line and you say, have I done that before? Or I have, but not quite in this context. Or I don't think I could do that. I don't even know what they're talking about. What does this even mean? Okay, that's it. I can't do this. Right? Absolutely. So because we're looking at the job spec at face value and then we're judging whether or not we've done that thing, we discount ourselves. And there's a few reasons why this isn't a good approach. One, oftentimes the job spec doesn't fully reflect what's going to be required in the role. Why? Because sometimes the job spec isn't actually written by the person who does the job or the person who supervises the job. It's sometimes written by HR, and HR doesn't always get the right information. And so they don't always put everything that is legit involved in the role on the job spec. And then the other thing is, just because you haven't done that specific thing in that specific way doesn't mean you don't have the skill set around it. So sometimes it's about looking at what are they asking for, understanding why they're asking for it. And so you might need to do a little bit of research and understand why this role has come about and what is this organization about and what are they trying to achieve, so that you can look at what is the reason for this bullet point. What are they actually trying to achieve with this particular requirement? Because then you can look in your experience and say, okay, I haven't necessarily done this in this industry, or I haven't done it in this way, but I have used the skill set that is very, very similar to what it is that they want. And I have got amazing results doing it. There's like stats that go around that talk about the difference between men and women when it comes to them looking at job specs. Like a woman wants to make sure that she ticks off at least like 95, 98% of that criteria list before she'll apply. And a man is fine with 60. Like if he can do 60% of the role, he's on it. Like he'll just apply. And so for many of us, we're discounting ourselves too soon for opportunities. So what we want to be doing, instead of focusing too much on the job spec, we want to start understanding how you can bring and add value. When you can bring and add value to an organization, like they notice it, they see it. When you can articulate it, you can be the candidate that really stands out. So what I mean by that is understand what is the main goal, or what are the main goals, challenges, priorities of the company, and are you positioning your expertise accordingly? So I'll give you an example from my career. When I was working as a legal consultant, and I was enjoying the work that I was doing as a legal consultant because it gave me the flexibility to continue building my coaching practice. And I got headhunted by an organization. They were a startup and they were focusing on software that was going to be used to help organizations make sure that they had the right people doing the right roles. And so the software was all about professional development. The reason why I was like, oh, this sounds good is because I'm a coach and I come from a professional development background and industry in that regard. And so this was going to give me the opportunity to blend my coaching skills and my knowledge of professional development and my experience as a lawyer. So when I went into that interview, I knew that there aren't going to be many other people who are lawyers and also coaches. Like it's a unique blend, right? So I went into the interview with that in mind. I understood the reason why they were looking for an in-house lawyer was they were spending a fortune on external lawyers. They were getting them to do their contracts, but they didn't understand the context of the company and how they were growing. So they were spending a lot of time on those contracts. And so their bills were really high. So when I went into the interview, I realized that that's my unique selling point. The fact that I'm a lawyer and I'm a coach, I understand the industry, I understand personal professional development. So when I went in, how I crafted my interview answers, I made sure that I highlighted that aspect of my experience. So much so that when I left the interview, I knew it. I was like, yeah, this is in the bag. Like, not to be big-headed or arrogant about it, but it was the fact that the things that they were asking and the way that I was answering, I was anticipating the challenges that I knew they would have because of my previous experience working as an in-house lawyer, and I spoke directly to them. And so for you, when you understand the context, it's not just about, oh, there's this role. It's like, ask questions, understand why is this role even here? What are they trying to achieve? Then you're really able to speak up the parts of your experience that are relevant. And that's where they see the value add. That's when you become like a no-brainer candidate of like, yeah, we need her. So that's what we want to be thinking about. Am I understanding the value that I can bring? Am I really clear on how I can add value to this organization and to this particular opportunity? And then am I speaking about it clearly? And so this is an example of someone who did this. So Christina, she was working for, I think she was working at Starbucks for like 10 years in their learning and development team. She got made redundant. And at that point, she was considering what she wanted to do next. She ended up landing 2 job offers in completely different industries. One was in procurement. I can't even remember what the other one was because she went into procurement, but they were very different. Both opportunities were different from each other, and they were both very different from the role that she had done. And the way that she landed that role, both that role and both offers, was through powerful positioning. And she did it in 90 days. And it was because she took the time to really understand, what are they looking for? What have I done? Where is their alignment? And how can I emphasize the bits of my experience that are really, really key? And so she was able to make that transition. And she sent me this email like a year after. She did this like in the pandemic also, a year after, to say that she basically like did the role, she got promoted, and then she was being sent on a secondment. And so considering she didn't come from that background, she didn't come from that industry, she went in, she hit the ground running, she leveraged her expertise, and then she made big, big moves while she was there. So it's absolutely possible when you understand what you've already got. Like, if you've been considering making moves for 5 years, 5 to 9 years, then that means you've got a load of experience already in your career that you need to leverage. Most people are not leveraging it, like not. So often I say to clients, I'm like, okay, so talk to me about what you did in your role. And they say, oh yeah, I was just doing this thing, I was just doing that, and then I did this, and I led this project, and I did this £5 million deal. And I'm like, wait, what? What now? Can we rewind? What did you just say? Oh yeah, I just did this thing. I'm like, hold on, can we just talk about how impactful that is? And the issue is, when you're in it yourself, sometimes it's hard to see the value of it. And that's the benefit of having someone else look at it for you, or someone else hear you speak, so they can reflect back to you how brilliant you are and how valuable your experience is. Because if you're in an environment where you don't get recognition, where like your line manager doesn't really speak to what it is that you've been doing or the contribution that you've been making, or worse, you're working hard and other people are taking credit for what it is that you've been doing. If you're in that type of environment, sometimes it can be hard for you to really find your voice around what it is that you do and the impact that you make. So I said a lot. I've been talking a lot. So let's just recap. 4 steps. Firstly, you want to identify an ideal target role that allows you to leverage your existing expertise. So really think about, what type of move am I going to be making in this season? You want to align. So you can be using strategic networking to validate your ideas and pick your path. So that kind of overlaps. You can do that validation piece partly in step 1, but it can continue in step 2. You want to be thinking about your transition plan. Oh, where am I going? Create your path of least resistance with your transition plan. And then you want to be attracting. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself as an ideal candidate to attract opportunities. Okay? Is that clear for everyone, that 4-step plan? Are we all good with that? Awesome. So at this stage now, it's like this framework is solid in terms of you thinking about these steps and then how they can apply to you. You can take them, you can run with them, you can think about, okay, let me break this all down and really work through this, or we can support you with it. So at the beginning, I talked to you about the framework and the programs that I run. So I'm just going to talk briefly about one of our programs. What I want to emphasize is that step 1 is crucial. Like the step 1 where you're really defining what it is that you want to do. Like this is the part that takes the most time, but it's the part that sets the foundation to allow you to speed up later on. So I want you to remember that phrase that I said earlier. Like you want to be slowing down at this phase so that you can speed up later. Slow down to speed up. Yeah. But the reality is, so many people skip over this phase. So often when I work with clients, many of them say, I never thought about this before. I've never taken the time to really consider like who I am as a person, or what my strengths are, and like what's important to me and what my values are. And if you've been in your career for a long time, the person that you were when you started your career is not the person that you are now. The person that you were when you started this role is probably not the person that you are now. So it's important that this type of reflection is done, not just once, but you do it on a regular cadence, or at any point where you're considering moving or you're at a crossroads. Like take the time to really be like, okay, like what's going on with me now, and what is it that I need in this next season of my career? So I'm going to talk to you briefly about the Career Clarity Accelerator. This is a self-study program that really helps you to create an unapologetic vision for the next phase of your career. So really take the time to say, what do I actually want? It sounds like an easy question, but it's not. Like, what do you want? What do you really want? And so it helps you to really unpack what it is that you want and create a vision for yourself, so that it's no more like making should-based decisions. Like, I should do that. I should. It makes sense, so I will. Like, a lot of the time we make should-based decisions. And so we want to go from that to actually, do I have a vision for where I want to go? It helps you to validate your career transition options so you can avoid wasting time and resources. Helps you to make data-driven decisions about what the right move is for you. So there's no more second guessing around whether or not this is the right move, so that you can actually make it rather than stay stuck. Leverage your existing expertise to transition with ease. So recognize that you can unpack all that you've been doing in the past and not have to discount it so that you're starting over. So no more downplaying the value that you bring and questioning whether or not you have got value to bring to the table. You'll be able to own your expertise. And then, like, finally, you start to position yourself to attract and land ideal opportunities. So no more hoping and waiting that people will reach out to you. Like, once you start doing the positioning piece, you're setting yourself up so that people are going to be reaching out to you, the right types of people. So if you have been unfulfilled in your role for a while, if you have no idea where to start with figuring out your best next move, if you want to make more impact and more money in your next role, if you want to feel more in control of your career trajectory, then this type of program, or this program, is perfect. So the Career Clarity Accelerator helps you make your next best move. Here's how. So it's broken down into bite-sized on-demand training. Also, you get swipe files and templates that can help you. So swipe files around like an ideal resume, an ideal CV that you can be using, templates around conversations that you can be starting when you're networking, understanding how to frame things so that you have a starting point and it isn't just like, I don't even know what to say if I'm going to be networking. So we help you with that with swipe files and templates. Guest expert masterclass, and this one is around mindset. I mentioned to you earlier, like, the mindset piece is so powerful. And so we have an expert who's a growth mindset expert, a TEDx speaker, and she gives some really practical guidance on how you can stop and shift the way that you're approach. That's her approach, but it's stop and shift around your thought process so that you can shift into a mindset that's going to be supportive for you as you move forward. And then you'll have access to a private CCM community, which is just a place for anyone who's inside of the program to gather and pool ideas. In my experience, when I've worked with clients in a group setting or in other programs where they can connect with one another, that networking that can happen immediately is so helpful. So often people are like, oh, I want to go into this space. And then there might be someone else in the community who wants to go into, who knows somebody or who is in that space. And you can have those golden nugget conversations quite easily with others who are in the community. And so just an example of someone who just finished the program. This is Erin. So she came and she was just been made redundant or laid off, as you guys say in America. And she was trying to figure out like what it is that she wanted to do. So she actually attended a masterclass like this a few months back. She took voluntary redundancy and she wanted to be intentional about her next step. So she was exploring options. She decided to take the course. And she said it was really helpful because it's a self-paced program. She was able to take that time to really consider those initial questions of like, what do I want to do? And have the introspection so she could get the answer. And she found the content of the program really helpful and the methods and the models that we use really clear. And so she said she'd recommend the course. But what's great is that after she took the course, she's now upgraded and we're working together inside one of my other programs. But she took the course and then at the end, she was like, okay, now I know what I want to do. Like, help me to position myself properly and help me land that role. And so she's at the place now where she knows what she wants to do. She's really excited about building out a portfolio career and doing some work that she's really, really looking forward to. So here is what you get. Just to summarize, so the on-demand training, I'm just going to summarize briefly the modules. So module 1 is about preparing you for change, helping you to really think about how do I set myself up to actually make this transition now. Module 2 helps you to audit where you are right now. Module 3 really digs into deciding what you want. And then module 4 is about positioning yourself for that transition. So it's taking you through, each module has bite-sized trainings for you to go through and various exercises for you to work through, so that you can ask yourselves the types of questions that probably wouldn't occur to you if you haven't gone through this process. And so the swipe files, as I mentioned, you've got CVs, cover letters, networking scripts, career change ideas bank. So there's like ideas from other people who've gone through career change, and some ideas as to like the types of things that you can be thinking about, the CCM community, and then the guest expert masterclass. And so the investment for the program, it's $497 in pounds. I have to work out what that is in US dollars. You have to do the conversion. I'll do that in a moment. But yeah, that's the normal price for the program. But if you join the program in the next 24 hours, someone who's come to this masterclass, or you've caught the replay, then the investment is just $297 for the entire program. So that is what I wanted to share with you all. And now I want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions. And while you can either type your question in the chat, or because there's not that many of us on right now, you can feel free to unmute and ask your question, but raise your hand and then I can ask you, and I'll just work out what the conversion rate is for the course as well. I know it's not James because I saw you before, but James Dillon's account.
Sorry, hi. Sorry, it's Kaylee. I'm phoning off using my husband's Zoom. How are you? Thank you for that. It was exceptionally informative and helpful. My question is, I was actually made redundant 4 weeks ago. So I'm in the position where I'm trying to sort of identify what I want to do. And I certainly can relate to a lot of what you're speaking about, sort of in the desperation of trying to find a new job, just applying for things that come my way and looking at everything. Now, the challenge that I'm finding is that if I want to make the leap in terms of making that big change and looking into a position that I don't necessarily have the experience in, it's either, as you say, a recruiter says like, no, you can't do that, and it's not in your best interest, which fine. But the other side is, because I'm trying to stay away from recruiters, if I just submit my application, I'm finding that if my experience is not aligning to what I'm looking to do, I just get that generic, sorry, thanks for your application, we've gone with someone else. So what is your suggestion in terms of trying to overcome that approach?
Yeah. So when you're making a transition from one industry to another, the most effective way to do it is via networks. So you may or may not know that the majority of roles that are available are not advertised. So only 20% of roles that are open are advertised by recruiters or job boards. So the majority of roles are actually filled through networks. What ends up happening, if you think about the psychology of it, if an organization is looking for someone new to come to their team, the first thing that they do is they ask their team members, does anyone know anybody? Does anyone know anyone who can fill this role? If they can't fill it that way, they might go out to their extended network. And you might see people do this sometimes where they post on LinkedIn and say, we're looking for this type of person. And then only then, if they can't fill it that way, do they go to recruiters, because they have to pay money, right? They have to like pay for ads. They have to pay recruiters. So what you want to be doing at this stage is like, if I know I want to make a leap, you want to be building up your network with people who are in the space that you're in, having golden nugget conversations with people. But when you're having those conversations, it's about understanding a bit about them. Like, how did you get into the industry? Like, what is the path for someone with my skill set? Like, what are some of the things that would be most beneficial within this industry? So understanding that and starting to make connections so that you can have conversations with people and you're able to actually talk about your experience and your background, rather than just sending a blanket, rather than sending an application where you're not able to give that full context. Because you want to have the opportunity to be able to dig into how your skill set is relevant. So the piece that I said before about aligning, that bit is probably really important for you to probably dig in a bit deeper than you're doing right now. Because I imagine you may be at the surface level of how your existing experience is relevant. And so you might need to dig into that more so you can really uncover like where the synergies are and also where you can add value. Because sometimes when you're coming from a different industry into the new, we can think, oh, I don't have the experience. But that fresh perspective that you can bring, depending on what the industry is, it can actually be really, really valuable and really beneficial. And so you kind of have to like dig into, okay, let me look at my experience in the round and where is there relevancy and where is there going to be impact so I can speak to it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that answer.
That's okay. My pleasure. Kaiba, in answer to your question, the conversion, it works out to be around $380 at the discounted rate.
Okay, thank you. So I also have a question. So with the golden nugget conversations,
yes,
many a time I may end up in a situation where I may go to, let's say, a Chamber of Commerce event, networking event, and I identify people I know I can have a golden nugget conversation with. But I also know I'm not ready to have that conversation. So I don't want to waste their time. So okay. I take their information, I introduce myself, take their information, and then over a month passes and I have not contacted them. And I'm pretty sure they look at me like I'm a joke because I haven't contacted them. But I am trying to prepare myself, and sometimes I get lost in the sauce.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So when you say I'm not ready,
yes,
what do you mean? You're not ready? What are you getting ready for?
Okay, I am at this stage where I believe I should start my own marketing consulting company. This is an idea I've been toying with for an extended period of time. Right? I have a lot of fears, but I'm at this space where I think I'm getting kicked in the back into starting it, right? So where you recommended the career audit, etc., I believe I have done that in some shape or fashion. I may not have done it as pointedly as you would have recommended. So it's like I keep dancing around certain things, but when it comes to the golden nugget conversations, that I'm assuming you would say basically there are like 6 questions you should go prepared to ask so that you can have proper guidance on what you should do and how you should go about it, etc. But when I say I don't think I'm ready, when it comes to formalizing what services I'm going to provide or understanding what I say I want to do a marketing consulting firm, but there are lots of things that could be a very broad description. I need to understand what exactly I want to offer.
Yes. Okay, so can I offer you some perspective on this?
Yes, please.
So the golden nugget conversations are there to help you to be ready. So right now you're like, okay, I can't have the conversation with anyone until I'm ready and I have my plan and I know what I'm doing. But actually, there's different ways to have these conversations. There are the golden nugget conversations that are based where the focus is research. And then there's golden nugget conversations where you're actually trying to like create an opportunity. At this stage, approach it like research. So what you're doing is you're approaching these conversations from a place of curiosity. And so it's not about you. It's about them and it's about the information that they have that can be helpful to you. So when you approach the conversations, what you want to be doing is approaching it with curiosity and saying, like, I understand, like, tell me a bit about your career. Tell me a bit about how you got into marketing or how you started your consultancy. What were the decisions that led you to that? What are the things you really enjoy about working for yourself, or what things don't you enjoy? When you can get people to start talking about themselves, they get excited because people don't always get time and space to talk about themselves. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. Well, most people do. And so when you're having the conversation from a very curious place, what then happens is this person is going to open up and they're going to share with you lots of information about their journey that's going to be helpful for you to say, oh, yes, like based on what they shared, I can see how that would work for me. Or actually, I don't like the sound of that. And then you go away and you take what you've heard and then you digest it. And then from there, you can make decisions. You don't have to go to them with anything. You use what they tell you to help you to determine your next step. You can mention that, you're at the stage in your career where you're thinking about a marketing consultancy, but you're in the research phase right now and you'd love to hear about their perspective.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So just have the conversations, and those conversations will often lead to more conversations because they might say, oh, you should speak to so-and-so as well. And then that's where you're in the place where you're gathering data, and then you're able to use that to make a decision.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I have a question. Hi, thank you for this. This is Sandra. Sandra Bramwell. Jasmine.
Oh, Sandra. Hi.
Just in terms of what if you're not clear? I know that there's a pathway to get clear about what it is that you want to branch out into, whether it's a pivot, leap, whatever. But what if it's something that you don't even have any idea about? Like, you don't even know to search it out because it hasn't even come to your realization yet that this is the ideal pathway for you. Because I've been tussling with, like, should I, they have these career kind of identifying who you are, these personality type of tests. But, having been in my own career for decades, and considering what is next, but I don't even know what I don't know in terms of looking at what there is that may not have a name for me yet, that I know of. So any insight on that?
Yeah. So in that first phase, when you're when you're looking at defining, there's different parts to it. So what I encourage people to do is take an inside out approach. So before you even say, like, okay, what's out in the marketplace and what's there, it's about, okay, let me understand myself now and understand what are the things that make me tick. So personality assessments are helpful with that. Like, let me understand, what are my actual strengths? Like, what am I really good at? What do I value? What's important to me? What do I have interest in? Right? And when you start to unpack some of that stuff, that can give you clues as to where you should direct your energy. So it's like, if I understand that one of my strengths is, like, I'm a people person, like, me going to do a role where I'm just going to be sitting in an office by myself, it's not going to work. Like, it's not going to work for me. And so what ends up happening is, when you start unpacking who you are and what's important to you in this season, then it's easier to start to, like, look out in the marketplace and say, well, what category of roles even fit into that? And you're able to say, okay, even if I want to talk from a value perspective, if I value like a steady pace and security, me going to work in, like, the tech industry that's always changing is probably not going to be a good look. So you can look at those different elements, like the strengths, the values, and then that can help you to say, okay, what actually kind of makes sense as a starting place. Then once you've got the starting place, that's when you can start having different conversations with people to find out, like, okay, what do you do? And what's that role called? We've had clients who have gone through and done those types of conversations and uncovered opportunities that they didn't even know existed, because they spoke to someone who was in an industry and they shared with that person what their skill set was and what they're looking for. And that person was like, oh, you need to look into this type of role, and gives it a title. And then they've got something to go on. And so you've got to start somewhere, because otherwise it is just plucking out of the air. So my thing is, let's start internal, and then we can go external, but we're not going external like scattergun everywhere. It's targeted. Yeah? Makes sense? Awesome.
Thank you. I couldn't find the button fast enough.
That's fine. All right. So that is what I wanted to share with you all. If you are interested in checking out the program, I've put the link into the description. So it's www.careerchangemakers, not description, comment box, www.careerchangemakers.com/CCA. And then you can just go on that page and then you can join the program there. If when we get off, you have any questions, follow-up questions, specifically about the program, you can feel free to send me an email. I'll just put my email address in here as well. Because you might be listening to this and say, I think I know what I want to do, but I don't know how to get there. Then it may be that one of our other programs is more suitable. So it's worth sending an email and then we can just explore what that looks like. But yeah, I think we are wrapping up. We have gone over time, so thank you for hanging with me. I did say it would be finished at 9, but we finished a little bit later. Hopefully you all got value out of this presentation, and the questions at the end were awesome as well. So yeah, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful afternoon, night, and hopefully see you all very, very soon. Take care. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, then I want to remind you that caring is sharing. Share this episode out with somebody else and head over to your podcast app to leave us a rating and review. For every rating and review that you leave, it helps us reach more people. It helps more people find the show. So I'd appreciate it if you go and do that right now. Thank you so much.